"Make my son speak," the billionaire begged. The shy waitress said one sentence. When 7-year-old Theo Marlowe finally made a sound after 3 years of silence, it wasn't for his father. It wasn't for the parade of specialists his fortune had summoned from 3 continents. It was for a waitress earning barely enough to cover her rent, a woman who noticed what everyone else had missed. This is the story of how the wealthiest man in Chicago learned that some things cannot be bought, some wounds cannot be diagnosed away, and some miracles arrive wrapped in the plainest packages. A single father desperate to hear his son's voice again. A woman running from a grief she couldn't outrun. And one snow-heavy night that changed the direction of both their lives. Snow was falling in slow, deliberate sheets the evening Elias Marlowe's town car eased along Lakeshore Drive, the city's lights smeared into halos behind frost-fogged glass. Elias sat in the back seat, his coat still buttoned, and felt nothing. Not the leather beneath him, not the warmth of the heated seats, not even the familiar weight of the watch on his wrist, a piece that had once cost more than most people made in half a decade. He felt nothing because feeling required energy, and energy required hope, and hope had been slowly starved out of him over 3 years by an endless procession of experts who took his money and offered him increasingly polished ways of saying, "We don't know." Beside him, Theo sat motionless. Small for his age, dark-haired, with pale green eyes that tended to look past things rather than at them. He wore a charcoal sweater Elias had laid out that morning, gray trousers, shoes that had cost $200 and would be too small in 3 months. His hands rested in his lap, fingers twitching now and then in patterns only he seemed to understand. "Almost there, bud," Elias said quietly. Theo didn't answer. Theo never answered. It had been 3 years and 2 months, 1,194 days, since his son had last spoken a word. Elias knew the number exactly because he had counted every single one, kept the tally in a notebook he'd never shown another living soul. 1,194 mornings of waking to silence. The same number of nights spent tucking a child into bed and receiving nothing back. Not a protest, not a whimper, not even a sigh. The doctors had names for it. Selective mutism they'd said first. Then a trauma response. Then psychological withdrawal following maternal abandonment. Over the years they had refined the terminology, added modifiers and subcategories, prescribed therapies and medications and behavioral programs. Elias had tried everything: speech therapists, play therapists, occupational therapists. He had flown in specialists from Boston, from Zurich, from a clinic in Munich that charged $40,000 for a 2-hour evaluation. The conclusion was always the same: physically there was nothing wrong. Theo's vocal cords worked. His cognition, while delayed in certain areas, showed no fundamental impairment. He could speak. He simply didn't or couldn't choose to. The distinction mattered to the professionals. To Elias it changed nothing. His son was silent and he did not know how to reach him. The car pulled up outside Lucerna, the kind of restaurant where a reservation required half a year's notice and your credit card seemed to sweat the moment you handed it over. Elias came here occasionally for business dinners, performances, really, where he played the role of the composed founder while other wealthy men measured him across white tablecloths and $40 glasses of wine. Tonight wasn't business. Tonight was Julian Reyes's birthday, and Julian had been Elias's college roommate back when Elias was just another engineering student with more ambition than sense. Julian had stayed through the lean years, through the failed first venture, through the brutal divorce. He was one of maybe 2 people Elias actually trusted. Mr. Marlowe. The valet held an umbrella that probably cost more than he earned in a week. Elias climbed out, then reached back for Theo. The boy moved mechanically, letting himself be steered onto the sidewalk. Snow melted against the umbrella above them. Theo didn't flinch, didn't react, just waited for direction. "Come on," Elias said, a hand on his son's shoulder. Inside, the restaurant glowed with exposed brick and low golden light, a string quartet playing something Elias didn't recognize. The air smelled of rosemary and money. "Mr. Marlowe, welcome back," the hostess said, professionally pleasant in the practiced way of someone who had perfected being noticed without being remembered. "Your party's already seated. Right this way." She led them past tables of people who looked as though they'd never worried about anything more serious than a wine pairing. Elias felt Theo's shoulder stiffen under his hand. Too many people, too much noise. But the boy kept walking because that was what he did. He endured. Julian had claimed the corner table, the one overlooking the frozen sweep of the lake. He stood when he saw them, grin already in place. "There he is," he said, pulling Elias into a one-armed hug. "And there's my man, Theo." He crouched to the boy's eye level without trying to touch him. "Hey buddy. Good to see you. You like pasta? They do this truffle thing that's basically witchcraft. Theo looked through him. A standard response. Julian didn't miss a beat. Sit. I already ordered appetizers because I have no self-control. They settled in, Elias in one chair, Theo beside him. Theo picked up his napkin immediately and began folding it with total concentration. Corner to corner, crease, unfold, repeat. Elias had learned long ago not to interrupt these small rituals. They gave the boy something to control in a world that must have felt endlessly chaotic. So, Julian said, pouring water into Elias's glass, how's the Solara deal looking? Close. Their board's split, but Preston's on our side. 2 more votes and the acquisition goes through. And if you can't get them? We walk and they probably collapse within 18 months. Their infrastructure's bleeding cash. Julian nodded, sipped his wine, and didn't ask about Theo directly. He knew Elias would share if there was anything worth sharing. There never was. The appetizers came, some elaborate dish involving octopus that had clearly taken 3 days to prepare. Julian talked about his recent trip to Lisbon, his girlfriend's habit of rearranging his kitchen, the electric car he was considering. Elias half listened, watching Theo instead. The boy had abandoned the napkin and was now tracing invisible shapes on the edge of the table, lips moving slightly, as if reciting something only he could hear. What did he think about? What lived behind those eyes during all those silent hours? Elias would have traded everything he owned, the company, the houses, every asset, for 5 minutes inside his son's mind. Mr. Marlowe? He looked up. A waitress stood at the table, late 20s, light brown hair pulled into a simple knot, none of the hostess's polish. She looked almost apologetic for taking up space. I'll be taking care of you tonight, she said softly. Can I start you with drinks? I'll have another glass of the Burlo, Julian said. Same as before. She wrote it down, then turned to Elias, and for just a second her eyes flicked to Theo. Something shifted in her expression. Not pity. Elias had learned to recognize pity from across a room. This was something else. Recognition maybe. Just water for me, Elias said. And milk for my son if you have it. We do. She hesitated, looking at Theo again. Whole milk okay? It was a small thing, directing the question to the boy instead of the father. Most servers treated Theo like furniture, spoke around him as if he weren't there. Theo didn't answer, of course. But his fingers stopped tracing for a moment. Whole milk's fine, Elias said. She nodded and slipped away. Elias watched her go, then turned back to Julian. Sorry, what were you saying? Nothing, Julian said, grinning. I was watching you watch the waitress. I wasn't. Relax. She's cute. A little shy, maybe. I wasn't watching her like that. Elias stopped, unsure what he'd actually been doing. Something about the way she'd looked at Theo had caught him. That was all. The waitress returned with the drinks. The milk came in an actual glass, not plastic. Another small consideration. Ready to order, or do you need a few more minutes? Few more minutes, Julian said. I'm torn between the duck and the short rib. The duck's excellent, cherry reduction. But the short rib's probably our most popular entree. Dangerous knowledge. Now I want both. She smiled just slightly and it changed her whole face. I can ask the kitchen for half portions of each if you'd like. You, Julian said, pointing at her, are my new favorite person. She looked at Elias. And for you? The salmon, he said. He ordered it every time, not because he loved it but because it required no decision. However the chef recommends. She wrote it down, then did something again, looked at Theo, not past him but at him. And what about you? She asked the boy directly. Elias opened his mouth to answer for him, the way he always did. But something made him stop. Maybe it was the way she'd crouched slightly, bringing herself to Theo's eye level. Maybe it was that she was actually waiting for a response. Theo's eyes lifted, not all the way to her face but up from the table. More engagement than Elias had seen from him all week. Do you like pasta? She asked. We've got a really good mac and cheese. It's not on the menu but I can get them to make it. Theo's fingers twitched. Or if you'd rather something else, that's fine too. The chicken's good. So are the mashed potatoes. You don't have to decide right now. She wasn't pushing. Just offering and waiting. Elias felt something crack open in his chest. Not hope, he'd learned better than that, but something close. Possibility maybe. Theo's hand moved, slow and deliberate. He picked up the folded napkin and set it carefully on the edge of the table. The waitress glanced at it, then back at him. The napkin's white, she said thoughtfully. Like the mac and cheese. Is that a yes? Theo's fingers twitched again. Could have been anything, a nervous tick, a random motion. But Elias had spent 3 years studying every gesture his son made, and this felt different. This felt like communication. "Mac and cheese it is," she said, smiling, "not performed, just quiet and real. I'll make sure they load it with extra cheese." She straightened, made a note, then glanced at Elias with something unreadable in her eyes. "I'll put this in for you. Shouldn't take long." She disappeared into the restaurant's rhythm. Julian was staring. "Did that just happen?" "What?" "Your kid he just talked to the waitress. With a napkin." "He didn't." "I've known Theo since he was born," Julian said. "I've never seen him engage with a stranger like that. Ever." Elias looked at his son. Theo had returned to tracing shapes on the tablecloth, but something in his posture had loosened. "Probably a coincidence," Elias said. "You didn't believe it?" Julian leaned back. "When's the last time you felt hopeful about anything with Theo?" Elias didn't answer. Couldn't. Hope had been beaten out of him by years of promised breakthroughs that delivered nothing. Hope was dangerous. It was what kept a man writing checks to people who couldn't help, believing that this treatment, this approach, would finally be the one. Before he could respond, Theo made a sound. Not a word, a hum, soft and tuneless, barely audible beneath the restaurant's noise. But it was there. Julian's eyes widened. Elias sat very still, afraid to move. The waitress returned with bread, noticed the humming, and something shifted in her expression. She didn't comment, just set the basket down and left again. But Elias saw her hands pause for a fraction of a second. She'd noticed. They ate their entrees in a strange, quiet haze. Theo's mac and cheese arrived in a small bowl rather than a plate, another tiny consideration. He picked up a regular fork, not the child's one Elias usually had to request, and ate like the food actually mattered. Not mechanically. Like a choice he was following through on. When the check came, the waitress set it in front of Julian, then glanced at Elias. "Everything okay?" "Yes," Elias said then because it felt insufficient. "Thank you, for how you were with him." She looked confused, as if she didn't understand what she'd done to earn thanks. "Of course. He's a sweet kid." How would she know that from 10 minutes? But she'd said it like she meant it. "I'm Elias," he said suddenly. "Elias Marlowe." "Maya," she said. "Maya Whitfield." They shook hands, hers smaller than his, calloused in a way that suggested work, not pampering. "Do you have experience with children? Professionally, I mean." Her expression shuddered so fast he nearly missed it, like a door slamming. "Not anymore," she said. "Excuse me, I should check my other tables." She was gone before he could ask anything else. In the car, Theo fell asleep almost instantly. Elias watched the city blur past and replayed the evening. The napkin, the humming, the way his son had actually looked at someone new for the first time in longer than he could remember. Probably meant nothing. A fluke, born of his own desperation to see patterns where none existed. But what if it wasn't? The thought was dangerous, the kind that led to crushed expectations. He pulled out his phone anyway, searched Lucerna Chicago staff, scrolled through photos until he found her. Maya Whitfield, server. No bio. A picture that looked like she hadn't wanted it taken. He stared at it for a long moment, then closed the browser. It was nothing. Had to be nothing. 3 days later, when Theo threw one of his rare silent tantrums, screaming without sound, hurling a cup across the kitchen, Elias found himself thinking about her. About the way she'd crouched to Theo's level and waited instead of filling the silence with chatter. A week after that, he made a reservation at Lucerna. Not for business. Not for a friend's birthday. Just for him and Theo. They arrived at 7 on a Thursday, 10 minutes early, sitting in the car while snow gathered on the windshield. Elias's heart was beating faster than it should for a dinner reservation. He'd negotiated billion-dollar acquisitions without breaking a sweat, but this made him anxious, because wrapped up in it was a hope he'd tried hard not to acknowledge. Inside, a different hostess seated them at a table in the middle of the room, too exposed, too much foot traffic. "Actually," Elias said, "is that corner table free? By the window. That's usually reserved for larger parties, but I'll pay whatever the difference is." They were reseated. Theo went straight to the window, pressing his palms to the glass, watching snow fall over the lake. A different waitress approached. "Good evening, I'm Claire. Is Maya working tonight?" Elias asked, immediately feeling like an idiot. Claire's smile tightened. "She is, but she's assigned to a different section. Could she take this table instead?" "I'd be happy to." He stopped himself before mentioning money again, but Claire's expression had already shifted to polite suspicion. "I'll check with the manager," she said and left. A man in his 50s approached in an expensive suit. Mr. Marlowe, I'm Desmond, the general manager. Claire mentioned you requested a specific server. Maya Whitfield. She served us last time and my son responded well to her. He has some difficulties. I'd consider it a personal favor if she could serve us tonight. Desmond studied him, calculating. Of course. Give me a moment. Maya appeared a few minutes later, looking confused and slightly worried. Mr. Marlowe. Desmond said you asked for me specifically. Is there a problem with... No, Elias said quickly. No problem. My son responded well to you last time. I thought it might help to have some consistency. And you got him to communicate. With the napkin. That was just... Maya stopped. I didn't really do anything. You did, Elias insisted. You spoke to him instead of at him. You waited instead of expecting me to answer for him. You saw him. Something flickered across her face. Pain, maybe, or recognition. Most servers would do the same, she said quietly. They don't. They really don't. A long silence. Theo's sugar packet tower, which he had apparently been building at the wait station, collapsed. Okay, Maya said finally. I'm happy to serve you. Can I start you with drinks? And just like that they were back to ordinary interaction, except Elias spent the whole meal watching her watch Theo, noticing the careful way she moved around the table, like she was navigating something fragile. Near the end of the meal, while Theo focused on his ice cream, Elias caught her attention. Can I ask you something? Her body tensed. Sure. Last time when I asked if you'd worked with children professionally, you said not anymore. What did you mean? That's personal, she said. I know. I'm sorry. It's just, my son hasn't spoken in 3 years. I've tried everything, every specialist in the country. Nothing works. But you walked up to our table and something changed. I need to understand why. It wasn't me, she said firmly. It was coincidence. I don't believe in coincidence. Then you should start. She glanced around to make sure no one was listening. Look, Mr. Marlowe, I'm sorry your son is struggling. I really am. But I'm a waitress. That's all. I can't help you. You already did. You brought him mac and cheese. That's not a miracle. It felt like one. Something in her expression cracked, just for a second. The professional mask slipping to reveal someone exhausted, carrying weight she couldn't set down. I have to check my other tables, she said, and left before he could say anything else. When the check came, Elias left a tip that was almost certainly offensive in its size. $500 for a $200 meal. He wasn't trying to buy her cooperation. He just wanted her to know she'd mattered. They were gathering their coats to leave when Theo did something extraordinary. He walked to the wait station where Maya was entering an order, stood beside her, and waited. Elias froze, afraid to breathe. Hey, Maya said softly, looking down. Did you need something? Theo held out his hand. And it was a napkin folded into a small, precise square. Maya took it carefully. Thank you. This is really nice. Theo looked at her, really looked, focused on her face, then turned and walked back to his father. Maya unfolded the napkin. Elias couldn't see what was inside from where he stood, but he saw her expression change, saw pain cross her face mixed with something else he couldn't name. She looked up, met his eyes across the restaurant, and in that moment he understood. She did have professional experience with children, and whatever had made her walk away from it still hurt enough to make her flinch at a folded napkin from a 7-year-old. Elias walked Theo to the door, then turned back. Maya was still at the station, staring at the napkin like it might vanish. He walked back to her slowly. Maya, I know you don't want to talk about your past. But whatever you did before, whatever made you understand how to reach him, it worked. And I need that. He needs that. I'm not asking you to fix him, he continued. I'm not asking for therapy. I'm asking if you'd be willing to spend some time with him. Let him get to know you. See if this is real. It's not real, she said. He's a kid who liked mac and cheese. Kids give people things all the time. Not this kid. This kid hasn't voluntarily interacted with a stranger in 3 years. He walked over to you. Gave you something. That's not nothing. She looked down at the napkin. When she unfolded it fully, Elias saw what Theo had drawn. A simple stick figure, lines and circles, the kind of drawing any 7-year-old might make. Except Theo hadn't drawn anything in years. I can't, Maya whispered. I'm sorry, but I can't. She folded the napkin carefully, like something precious, and tucked it into her apron pocket, then walked away into the back of the restaurant. Elias stood there a long moment, feeling like he'd lost something he'd never actually had. Then he took Theo's hand and walked out into the snow. In the car, he sat behind the wheel without starting the engine, listening to snow tick against the roof. He pulled out his phone and searched, Maya Whitfield, Chicago, psychologist. The results came back almost immediately. Dr. Maya Whitfield, child psychology, top of her graduating class at Northwestern. 3 years at a children's hospital. Published research on selective mutism in traumatized children. A career that looked brilliant, promising, and then nothing. Stopped 2.5 years ago. No explanation, no forwarding address. He found the reason in a news article dated 2 years back. Child dies in tragic fall during home visit. A 7-year-old named Ethan Ruiz had fallen from a second-story window while under supervision. Dr. Whitfield had been present, had called 911, had ridden in the ambulance, had stayed with the family at the hospital. The article carefully avoided assigning blame. Accident, it said, tragedy, no charges filed, but Elias could read between the lines. He could imagine what she must have carried afterward. No wonder she disappeared into a job that asked nothing more of her than bringing people their food. He sat there in the dark, snow falling around the car, and felt something shift in his chest. Recognition, maybe, that they were both people trying to carry something too heavy to lift alone. Theo hummed in the back seat. Elias started the car. "Let's go home, bud." But as he drove through the quiet, snow-hushed streets, he knew he wasn't done. His son had drawn a picture for the first time in 3 years, and the woman who'd inspired it was hiding in a restaurant, pretending to be someone else. And in Elias's world, that was nothing short of a miracle. Elias spent the next 3 days trying to talk himself out of pursuing it further. He had a company to run. The Solara deal was approaching a decision point, and Preston kept calling with updates that demanded his full attention. He should have been in the office 16 hours a day. Instead, he kept thinking about a folded napkin and a woman who'd looked at his son like he was worth waiting for. Theo had been different since that second dinner. Not dramatically, no sudden speeches, but small things had shifted. He'd started drawing again, mostly stick figures on whatever paper he could find. Mrs. Alvarez, the nanny, reported finding sketches on the backs of grocery lists. "He's never done this before," she said, holding up a drawing of 3 figures, one tall, one medium, one small. "Not in years," Elias said, staring at it. "Family maybe. Or just random shapes." He didn't know how to interpret it. Mrs. Alvarez gave him the careful smile people used when they thought he was hoping too much. Children go through phases. But it wasn't nothing. Elias knew his son well enough to recognize when something had shifted in the boy's internal landscape. On Thursday afternoon, Elias made a decision that would have horrified him if he'd stopped to think about it rationally. He canceled a call with his CFO, told his assistant he'd be out for the rest of the day, and drove to Lucerna. It was 3:30, too early for dinner service. The restaurant was closed, chairs stacked, someone mopping the floor. He knocked anyway. A young man in his early 20s opened the door, annoyed. "We're closed till 5. I'm looking for Maya Whitfield. Is she here?" The kid's expression turned guarded. "Why?" "Please, just tell her Elias Marlowe needs 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." The kid studied him, sighed, and disappeared inside. 5 minutes later, Maya appeared in jeans and a plain sweater, hair down instead of pulled back. She looked younger like this and more tired, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she hadn't been sleeping. "Mr. Marlowe, what are you doing here?" "Elias," he corrected automatically. "I need to talk to you about Theo. I already told you I can't help. Just hear me out." 5 minutes. She glanced back into the restaurant, then stepped outside, crossing her arms. 5 minutes. Elias had rehearsed careful arguments during the drive over, but standing in front of her, they all evaporated. He's drawing again. Constantly. And he's humming these little tuneless melodies, like he's working something out in his head. Mrs. Alvarez says he seems more present. It started after the 2 dinners here. Whatever you did, whatever you said, it's reaching him in a way nothing else has. I didn't do anything. I took his order and brought him food. You gave him space. You didn't push, didn't demand a response. You saw him as a person, not a problem. Any decent person would do the same. But they don't, he said, frustration creeping into his voice. I've taken him everywhere. Doctors who charge thousands of dollars an hour and treat him like a puzzle to solve. You didn't do that. You just talked to him like he was already whole. Maya looked away, jaw tight. Whatever's happening with Theo, it's not because of me. Kids change on their own timeline. Maybe. Or maybe you triggered something. Either way, I'd like you to spend more time with him. I'm not a therapist anymore. I know. I looked you up. Her eyes snapped to his face, anger flashing there. Dr. Maya Whitfield, child psychologist. Published research on selective mutism. He paused. And Ethan Ruiz. All color drained from her face. You had no right. You're right. I shouldn't have. It was invasive and I'm sorry. But I needed to understand why someone with your background was serving tables. It's none of your business. You're right about that too, Elias said. But here's what is my business. My son is showing signs of progress for the first time in years, and it started the moment he met you. So I'm asking, begging if that's what it takes, please consider spending time with him. Not as his therapist. Just as someone he responds to. I can't. I told you I can't do this anymore. Why not? Because I already failed one child, she said, voice cracking, and I won't, do that again. She turned away and Elias saw tears in her eyes. You didn't fail him, Elias said quietly. It was an accident. You weren't even in the room when it happened. I was supposed to be watching him, she said to the wall. That was my job, to keep him safe while his mother was at work. I got pulled into a phone call from the hospital. 5 minutes. 5 minutes and he climbed out a window I didn't know was unlocked. It wasn't your fault. You don't get to decide that. She turned back, pain raw on her face. You weren't there. You didn't hear him hit the ground. You didn't do compressions on a 7-year-old while waiting for an ambulance. You didn't have to tell his mother her son was gone. I'm sorry, Elias said. I shouldn't have pushed. I'm desperate. I've watched my son disappear a little more every day for 3 years, and I don't know how to get him back. When I saw him respond to you I thought, I don't know. I was wrong to come here. He turned to leave. He made it 3 steps before she spoke. What would it involve? If I said yes, what would you expect? He turned back. She was wiping her eyes with the heel of her hand. Just time, he said carefully. Maybe an hour or 2 a week, somewhere neutral, a park, a museum. You wouldn't have to do anything specific. Just be present with him. And if it doesn't keep improving, if this was just a fluke, then we tried. That's more than we've had in a long time. Maya stood there, arms wrapped around herself for a long moment. Finally she took a shaky breath. 1 month, she said. I'll spend time with him for 1 month. After that, we reassess. And if at any point I think this isn't working, or that I'm doing more harm than good, I walk away. No arguments. Relief flooded through Elias so intensely he felt dizzy. Done. Whatever you need. I don't want money. This isn't a job. This is, she searched for words. This is me trying to see if I can still do something I used to be good at. That's all. Okay. No money. And you don't tell Theo you used to be a psychologist. He doesn't need that pressure. You're just someone who wants to spend time with him. Agreed. She pulled out her phone. Give me your number. They exchanged information. Willow Bluff Park, she said, typing. 10 in the morning, the lot by the boathouse. We'll walk the shore trail. Perfect, Elias said. Thank you. Seriously. Don't thank me yet, she said. I might be terrible at this now. I doubt that. You shouldn't. She pocketed her phone. I need to get ready for my shift. I'll see you Saturday. Saturday arrived cold and gray, the kind of Chicago weather that couldn't decide whether it wanted to snow or just threaten it. Elias made breakfast, which Theo ignored as usual. We're meeting a friend today, Elias said as Theo pushed food around his plate. Remember Maya from the restaurant? We're going to the park with her. Theo didn't react. Elias hadn't expected him to. They arrived at 10. Maya was already there, sitting on a bench in a heavy coat and boots that had clearly seen use. When she saw them, she stood, and Elias saw the same nervousness in her posture that he felt. Hey, she said, then crouched to Theo's level. Hi, Theo. Nice to see you again. Theo looked at her, not past her, at her. His fingers twitched in that familiar thinking pattern. I thought we'd walk down to the shore, she said gently. There's a good trail. We might see some birds. Sound okay? Theo didn't respond, but he didn't pull away either when she started walking. He fell into step beside her, Elias trailing slightly behind. The trail wound through bare trees dripping with frost. Maya walked slowly, letting Theo set the pace, pointing out a cardinal here, an odd frozen puddle there, but never demanding acknowledgement. They reached the shoreline, rocky, gray, the lake stretching out like hammered pewter. Maya found a driftwood log to sit on. Theo immediately began collecting stones, sorting them into piles by criteria only he understood. You can sit, Maya told Elias. This might take a while. She pulled a small sketchbook from her coat pocket. I like to draw when I'm outside, she said to Theo without expecting an answer. Helps me notice things I'd miss otherwise. She began sketching loose lines, the curve of the shoreline, the shapes of rocks. Theo glanced over occasionally, watching her hand move. After 10 minutes, he approached with a flat gray stone, a white stripe running through it. That's a really good one, Maya said. Perfect skipping stone. Wanna try? Theo considered this, then nodded, small, barely perceptible, but a nod. She showed him how to hold it, how to flick his wrist. It's all in the angle. Flat like this. Her stone skipped twice before sinking. Theo's plunked straight down. Good first try. Takes practice. They spent 20 minutes throwing stones. Elias sat on the log, feeling something unclench in his chest. This was what he'd forgotten existed. Simple, uncomplicated time with his son. How often did you do this? Elias asked quietly. Before. With your patients. Most of my sessions were in an office, Maya said without looking up from her sketch. But sometimes we'd go to a park or a zoo, wherever the kid felt comfortable. The setting mattered less than the presence. Being fully there. Not performing care. Kids can tell when you're faking it. Theo made a sound then, not a word but a hum that rose and fell with something like melody, the same tune he'd been humming since that first night. Maya looked over, a small smile crossing her face. I know that one. She started humming along, matching his tune. Theo's head came up, eyes widening slightly. She kept humming, not looking directly at him, just adding harmony. His humming grew louder, more confident. They hummed together for maybe 30 seconds before he stopped and went back to his rocks. But something had loosened in him. He's different today, Elias observed later. More willing to try things. That's engagement, Maya said. Whether it's progress depends on what you're measuring. I'm measuring whether he'll ever talk again. She was quiet a moment. What if he doesn't? What if this is who he is? The question hit harder than Elias expected. Then I failed him. What? Plenty of nonverbal people live full lives. There are other forms of communication. Sign, writing, technology. If Theo never speaks another word, it doesn't mean his life is over. You don't really believe that. I do actually. I've worked with kids who never developed verbal language. Some were the most expressive, joyful children I've ever known. They just communicated differently. Noah, Theo called out then, not words but a clear, intentional sound. He was pointing at something in the shallow water. Maya crouched beside him. A small crab-like creature, actually a crayfish given the lake, scuttled between rocks. Oh wow, look at that. See the color on its back. Theo leaned forward, fascinated. They stayed still, watching until it scuttled into deeper water. Theo made a disappointed sound. We can come back next week, Maya said. Look for more if you want. Theo looked at her, then at his father, then nodded, clear, unmistakable. Yes. Elias felt tears prick his eyes. Such a small thing. A nod. But it was his son making a choice about the future, something he hadn't done in longer than Elias could remember. The second Saturday was warmer. Maya brought bubbles and sidewalk chalk. Theo blew his first wobbling bubble and looked at her with something that might have been pride. They decorated a flat rock with colored chalk for an hour, Maya adding shapes, Theo filling them in or drawing over them entirely. She never corrected, just kept offering. Can I ask you something? Maya said while Theo was absorbed. What happened with his mother? Elias hadn't expected the question, but it still hit like a blow. She left. 3 months after he stopped talking. Said she couldn't handle it. Sent divorce papers, signed away custody. I haven't heard from her since. Maya struggled for words. That must have been incredibly hard for both of you. Theo doesn't remember her. Or if he does, he's never shown it. She'd already started checking out before she actually left. Kids don't choose selective mutism, Maya said quietly. It's a protective mechanism. I know that now. Didn't then. Elias watched Theo add purple chalk to the rock. The doctors think it was a combination, her pulling away, stress in the house, maybe something genetic. No single cause. Just a perfect storm that made talking feel impossible. And you've been doing this alone. I have Mrs. Alvarez and my mother helps, though mostly she suggests boarding schools. Maya looked at him, really looked, and Elias felt seen in a way he hadn't in a long time. Not as a founder, not as a headline. Just as a tired father, constantly falling short. You're doing better than you think, she said. How would you know? Because Theo's here. He's present. He's trying. Kids who aren't loved don't try. They just shut down completely. The third Saturday brought snow flurries. Elias offered to reschedule. Maya's text came back immediately. Unless Theo minds getting wet, I'm still good to go. They went. She brought modeling clay that wouldn't dry in the cold. Theo pressed his thumb into a shape he'd made and looked at her, checking her reaction. Even better, Maya said. Now it has your mark on it. No one else could make it exactly like that. On the walk back, Theo stayed close to her, not holding her hand, that would have been too much too fast, but matching her stride. At the parking lot, he reached into his pocket and handed her the little clay shape he'd made. For me? She asked. He nodded. I'm going to keep this somewhere safe, she said. Maybe on my windowsill where I can see it every morning. Theo's lips curved. Not quite a smile. Close. That night, Elias's phone buzzed. He's doing really well. You should be proud. I am, he typed back. Thank you for seeing him. 3 dots, then he's easy to see. He's not as hidden as he thinks. The fourth Saturday was remarkably sunny, the kind of pale winter light that made Chicago feel possible instead of merely tolerable. Maya brought 2 coffees. I wasn't sure how you'd take it, so I got it black. Black's fine, Elias said, taking the cup. It was the first time they'd been alone since the drive back from that first meeting at her restaurant. How's work? He asked, immediately feeling foolish. Fine. Same as always. She smiled. You could go back to psychology. You clearly have the background. I know what I could do, Maya interrupted gently. I choose not to. Because of Ethan Ruiz. Her expression closed. Yes. Because I'm not responsible for Theo. Not really. Something goes wrong, if I fail somehow, it's not my fault. I'm just someone spending time with him. You don't believe that. Maybe not. But it's what I need to tell myself to keep doing this. She stared at her cup. Do you know what it's like to carry someone's death around? To know a child died because you weren't paying attention? It was an accident. Everyone told me that. But knowing something intellectually doesn't change how it feels. Mrs. Alvarez arrived with Theo before the silence could stretch further. The boy actually ran, to Maya. Hey you, she said, standing. Ready for an adventure? She led them to a different cove that day, pulling out a simple kite. Neither of them had flown one in years, so they figured it out together, laughing at every crash. When it finally caught the wind and held for 30 seconds, Theo made a high, joyful sound, not a word but unmistakably happy. Watching them celebrate over a kite that was about to crash again, Elias realized something that should have been obvious from the start. He wasn't just grateful to Maya for helping his son. He was falling for her, not because of her quiet beauty, though he'd noticed it more each week, not only for her kindness, but because she'd given him back something he'd thought was lost, hope. The possibility that his son could be happy. The kite crashed. Theo ran to retrieve it. Elias took a photo without thinking. The 2 of them in the winter light, kite string tangled at their feet. Later, he'd remember this as the moment everything changed. The month ended and Maya didn't leave. Neither of them mentioned it explicitly. The following Saturday she simply showed up at Willow Bluff Park as she had every week before. Theo's progress was undeniable now. He still wasn't speaking, but the small changes had accumulated into something significant. More eye contact, initiated interaction, an unexpected laugh that stopped Elias mid-sentence the first time he heard it. Mrs. Alvarez noticed too. He's lighter lately, she said one evening. Like something heavy got lifted off him. The truth was, Elias looked forward to Saturdays with an intensity that would have embarrassed him if he'd admitted it aloud. He noticed things about Maya now, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when thinking, how her laugh started quiet and then surprised her into something louder. It was Julian who finally called him out on it, over an overpriced lunch that was supposed to be about the Solara acquisition. So when are you asking her out? Elias nearly choked on his water. That's not what this is. Please. I've watched you close billion-dollar deals without blinking. You get nervous before Saturday mornings at the park. Last week you spent 20 minutes explaining how she taught Theo to identify birds. She's helping your son and you're falling for her. Elias didn't deny it. Couldn't. It's complicated. It's only complicated if you make it complicated. When's the last time you were actually happy? Julian asked. Not satisfied. Happy. Elias thought about it. Last Saturday. At the shore. Maya found this spot with crayfish and spent an hour showing Theo. He was fully present and she was laughing at something and the sun was on her face and she looked. He stopped, realizing what he'd revealed. Julian grinned. You've got it bad. The opportunity came, unintentionally, from his mother. I need you at the winter benefit, Eleanor Marlowe announced without preamble on the phone. The one I've been planning for 6 months. You promised. Elias had forgotten entirely. His mother threw a massive charity gala every December. More about social positioning than actual charity. I'll be there, he said. Good. And bring someone. You showing up alone makes people talk. I don't care what people say. Well, I do. Bring Theo then. It's time he learned to function in social situations. Absolutely not. He doesn't do well in crowds. He'll never do well if you keep hiding him away. She hung up before he could argue further. Elias sat there, dread settling in his chest. The benefit would be a nightmare for Theo. Hundreds of people, loud music, expectations. Unless Maya came. If she was there to help him navigate it, it might be tolerable, and it would give Elias a reason to see her outside their usual routine. He texted her before he could talk himself out of it. I have a favor to ask. Could we meet for coffee this week without Theo? She agreed to meet Tuesday. Elias arrived early, rehearsed a straightforward explanation, and then delivered it in one nervous, unbroken stream about his mother's gala and needing Theo to have support and being willing to pay her for her time. Breathe, Maya interrupted, amused. You want me to come to a gala with you and Theo to help him? It's going to be overwhelming for him. But if you're there, he might do better. She studied him. You don't need to pay me. I do though. This is beyond our usual arrangement. Your mother's gala, she repeated slowly. And you want me there. I want Theo to have support. You're the only person I trust for that. Also, if I'm honest, I could use someone in my corner too. These things exhaust me. Something shifted in her expression. When is it? Saturday, 2 weeks out. Starts at 7. I'd need something to wear. Elias blinked. You're saying yes? I'm saying I need to know the dress code. The night of the benefit arrived clear and cold. Elias helped Theo into his small suit. The boy kept tugging at his collar. I don't like these either, buddy, Elias said, adjusting the tie. But Maya will be there and we'll leave as soon as we can. Deal? Theo nodded. The benefit was held at the Drake, transformed into something resembling a winter palace. Ice sculptures, white flowers, lighting that cost more than most people's cars. Eleanor Marlowe stood near the entrance in a gown that probably cost more than Maya made in half a year. Finally, Eleanor said, air-kissing Elias's cheek. Her eyes landed on Theo. And here's my grandson. Don't you look handsome? Theo shrank against Elias's leg. He's overwhelmed. It's a lot of people. He'll adjust. Eleanor turned to greet someone else. Elias found a quiet corner. His phone buzzed, the car service 5 minutes out. He hadn't considered how his mother's circle would dissect anyone new he brought. A couple approached, an old business contact and his wife, who crouched in front of Theo with exaggerated enthusiasm. Aren't you adorable? What's your name, sweetie? Theo stared at her, silent. He doesn't talk, Elias said, sharper than intended. The woman straightened, smile faltering, and made an awkward retreat. Elias watched her lean close to whisper something to her husband and could imagine exactly what. His phone buzzed again, guest arrived. He looked toward the entrance and forgot how to breathe. Maya stood in the doorway in a simple deep blue dress, nothing flashy, fitting her perfectly. She looked nervous and beautiful and entirely out of place among the social climbers. She spotted him, relief crossing her face as she made her way through the crowd. Sorry I'm late. Traffic. You're fine. You look, he stopped himself. You look nice. She crouched to Theo's level. Hey Theo. What do you think? Too fancy. Theo shook his head quickly, then did something that made Elias's heart clench. He reached out and took her hand as naturally as breathing. Maya's eyes went wide, looking at Elias in question. He doesn't usually, Elias started, then stopped. That's new. Is it okay? It's more than okay. It's perfect. Eleanor descended on them a moment later. Elias, you didn't tell me you were bringing someone. Maya Whitfield, Maya said, extending her free hand, keeping the other firmly in Theo's grip. It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Marlowe. Ms. Marlowe, actually. I kept my maiden name. Eleanor's eyes swept over Maya's dress, her posture, everything. And how do you know my son? I've been spending time with Theo. Helping with some social development. A careful, not quite lie. Eleanor's eyes narrowed slightly. Are you a therapist? I work in food service now. How interesting, Eleanor said in a tone that suggested it was anything but. She drifted off to greet other guests. She hates me, Maya murmured. She doesn't hate anyone specifically. She just doesn't like anyone much. It's not personal. It feels personal. Dinner was announced. Their table companions were mostly business associates and their spouses, the kind of people who made conversation without saying anything meaningful. Theo, seated between Elias and Maya, grew increasingly overwhelmed as the noise rose, his fingers drumming against the tablecloth in rapid patterns. Maya leaned close and spoke quietly enough that only he could hear. His shoulders relaxed slightly. She pulled a small notebook from her purse and set it in front of him, and he began drawing, the motion calming him. A woman across the table watched this with poorly disguised curiosity. Your son is very artistic. Does he go to school? Private tutor. Oh, that's probably best, given his situation. Elias felt his jaw tighten. Given what situation? Well, he's not speaking. I just meant it's easier in a controlled environment. He's 7, Elias said flatly. He's not a science experiment that needs controlled environments. He's a child. Awkward silence descended. Maya's hand found his under the table, a gentle squeeze, a reminder to breathe. He forced his jaw to unclench. Excuse me, he said, standing. I need some air. He stepped out onto a balcony, the cold hitting his face like a slap. Behind him, footsteps. That was quite an exit, Maya said, joining him at the railing. She was being condescending about Theo. I know. They stood in silence, watching the skyline glitter against the dark sky. He's holding your hand now, Elias said eventually. A month ago he wouldn't have touched a stranger. I'm not a stranger anymore. No, he agreed. You're not. She looked at him, something vulnerable in her expression. Elias. A crash from inside cut her off. Through the glass doors they saw commotion at their table. Theo standing, chair knocked over, hands over his ears, people staring. They rushed back in. Theo was on the edge of a meltdown, the noise, the lights, the crowd, all of it too much. Maya reached him first, crouching without touching, positioning herself between him and the staring room, giving him a wall to hide behind. It's okay. Too loud, isn't it? Too many people. Theo nodded frantically. Do you want to leave? Another nod. We should go, Maya said, looking up at Elias. Eleanor appeared, expression tight. What's going on? No one needs to leave, he just got here. He's having a panic attack, Mother. We're leaving. You're making a scene. I don't care. Get Theo to the lobby, he told Maya. I'll meet you there. Maya guided Theo through the parting crowd. Eleanor grabbed Elias's arm. You're embarrassing me. You're embarrassing yourself. Your grandson is in distress and all you care about is what your friends think. That's not fair. I've tried with that boy. You treat him like a problem instead of a person. Just like everyone else here. He pulled his arm free and walked away, leaving his mother standing in the middle of her perfect gala, looking anything but composed. In the lobby, Maya had Theo on a bench, breathing still elevated but calming as she hummed his tune softly. The boy's hand slowly came down from his ears. The car was already waiting. Maya had texted ahead. Within minutes of the drive, Theo was asleep, his head against her shoulder. I'm sorry, Elias said quietly. Tonight was a disaster. It wasn't your fault. You were trying. It's not enough. It's more than most parents do. She looked down at Theo's sleeping face. He knows you love him. That matters more than one bad night. They rode in silence for a while. Thank you for being there, Elias finally said. For knowing what he needed when I was too angry to think straight. That's what I'm here for. Is it? Because lately it feels like you're here for more than just helping Theo through hard moments. Her expression shuddered. I don't know what you mean. The car pulled up to her building. We're here, she said. I should go. Wait. He put a gentle hand on her arm. Can we talk? Really talk. About what? About this. About us. There is no us, Elias. There's you and Theo and there's me helping Theo. That's all. You don't believe that. I have to believe it, she said. Because anything else is too complicated. Too risky. Why? Because I can't let myself care this much. Not about Theo, not about you. Because when I care, when I get close, people get hurt. Ethan got hurt. I got hurt. I can't do that again. You're not responsible for what happened to Ethan. You don't know that. I do, Elias said firmly. I read every report. It was a tragedy. Not your fault. Tears streamed down her face. Then why does it still feel like my fault? Why do I still see his face every time I close my eyes? Noah was asleep between them and Maya looked like she might shatter if touched. I should go, she said again, climbing out before he could stop her. The driver glanced back. Home, sir? Yeah, Elias said quietly. Home. That night, once Theo was settled, Elias's phone buzzed. I'm sorry about tonight. I think we should take a break from our Saturdays. Give Theo space to process. Something cold settled in his stomach. She was running, pushing them away before she could get hurt again, or before she could fail them the way she believed she'd failed Ethan. He typed back, "If that's what you think is best." "I do. I'm sorry." He sat with his sleeping son, watching his chest rise and fall, replaying the evening. They'd made so much progress, and now she was leaving because she was too scared to stay. Another text arrived. "Tell Theo I'll miss him and that none of this was his fault." Anger flashed through Elias. She was doing it again, taking on responsibility that wasn't hers. He called. She didn't answer. He called again. On the third try she picked up. "Maya, don't do this. Don't walk away because you're scared." "I'm not scared. I'm being realistic." "You're being a coward." Silence. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. You're running because this got too real, because Theo started needing you and I started caring about you, and that terrified you. You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" "You've spent 2 years hiding in a restaurant because it was safe. It doesn't require you to care, doesn't risk anyone getting hurt. But then Theo came along and you couldn't help yourself. You cared anyway. And now that we need you, you're bailing." "I'm protecting you," she said, voice shaking. "Both of you. Before I fail you the way I failed Ethan." "You didn't fail Ethan. You weren't there." "Neither were you," she shot back. "A child climbed out a window you had no reason to think was unlocked. That's not failure. That's tragedy. But you've decided to carry that guilt like it defines you." "Stop. Just stop." "No. Because someone needs to tell you the truth. You're brilliant with Theo. You've helped him make more progress in a month than in 3 years. But instead of accepting that, you're convinced you're going to hurt him. You're so terrified of failing that you won't let yourself succeed. This isn't about success or failure. Then what is it about?" "It's about the fact that I'm falling for you," she said, almost shouting. "And that terrifies me more than failing Theo, because I can't be what you need. I can't be the person who saves your son and falls in love with you and builds some perfect life. I'm too broken for that." Elias felt like he'd been struck. "You're falling for me?" A long pause. "Yes." "Then why are you pushing me away?" "Because when people love me they get hurt. My parents died in a car accident when I was 17. Ethan died while I was supposed to be watching him. Everyone I care about gets hurt. Maya, that's life. People get hurt. But that doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you hold on to the people you love while you have them." "I can't," she whispered. "I'm sorry, but I can't." The line went dead. Theo stirred that night, sitting up in the dark. "Can't sleep?" Elias asked. Theo shook his head. Elias pulled him close. "Maya's not coming back," he said, and hadn't meant to say it aloud, but it slipped out anyway. "She's scared of getting hurt. So she's leaving before anything bad can happen." Theo went very still. Then he opened his mouth and sound came out. Not words, not yet, but a deliberate vocalization, rough and uncertain. One syllable. "May." Elias couldn't breathe. His son had just spoken, actually spoken, for the first time in 3 years. Her name, or the closest he could get to it. "Theo. Did you just—" "May," Theo said again, more insistent, eyes wide and urgent. "You want Maya back?" Theo nodded frantically. "Me too, bud. Me too." Elias didn't sleep that night. When Mrs. Alvarez arrived at 7, she found him still dressed from the night before, unshaven, making coffee with shaking hands. "Theo spoke," he said. "Last night. Her name, or close to it." Mrs. Alvarez set down her mug. "And Maya? What did she say?" "She doesn't know. She told me last night she's done, needs space. Can't do this anymore." "You're supposed to fight," Mrs. Alvarez said firmly. "That woman loves your son. Maybe loves you too. And your son just spoke for the first time in 3 years because he wants her back. So yes, you fight. What if I'm asking too much? What if I'm being selfish, expecting her to risk that kind of pain again? Or maybe you're being a coward. Just like her." The words hit harder because they were true. He was still without a plan when Julian called, having already heard from Eleanor about the disastrous benefit. Elias gave him the full account. "You're in love with her," Julian said. "And she's in love with you, and you're both too scared to do anything about it. Look, she's carrying guilt that's eating her alive. Until she deals with it, she's going to keep running. So show her that what she's scared of isn't as scary as losing what you have together." After hanging up, Elias pulled up the old article about Ethan Ruiz again, read it more carefully. Near the end was a quote from Ethan's mother, Carmen Ruiz, speaking 3 months after her son's death. "Dr. Whitfield did everything she could. She loved my Ethan. What happened wasn't her fault. I never blamed her. Only Maya blamed Maya. He found an address for Carmen Ruiz, an hour outside the city, and grabbed his keys. Carmen Ruiz answered her door looking older than her years, exhaustion in every line of her face, but her eyes were kind. "Mrs. Ruiz, I'm Elias Marlowe. I know this is unexpected, but I need to talk to you about Maya Whitfield." Her expression shifted immediately. "Is she okay?" "She's struggling with what happened to Ethan. I thought if I understood that day better, I could help her." "You care about her?" "Yes." "Come in." The house was filled with photographs of a smiling boy with dark hair and his mother's eyes. Carmen made coffee neither of them drank. "Maya hasn't contacted me in over 2 years, Carmen said quietly. "I tried reaching out, wanted to tell her it wasn't her fault. She wouldn't answer. Eventually I stopped trying." "She thinks she killed your son." "I know, but she didn't." Ethan had severe ADHD impulse issues. He'd climb things, jump from heights without thinking. Maya knew that. It's why I hired her to help him manage those impulses. "What happened that day?" Carmen took a shaky breath. "I was at work. Maya was doing a home visit, part of his treatment plan. The hospital called her about another patient, an emergency. She stepped into the kitchen to take it, told Ethan to stay put and color. She was gone maybe 5 minutes. Ethan climbed out the window. I thought it was locked. He'd figured out how to unlock it the week before and I didn't know." Carmen wiped her eyes. Maya heard the impact, called 911 immediately, started CPR. She rode in the ambulance, stayed at the hospital. She was there when he died. Held my hand while I said goodbye. Elias's throat tightened. "I'm sorry." Maya blamed herself from the first minute. Said she should have checked the windows, should have watched him every second. But that's not realistic. You can't watch a 7-year-old every second. Kids find ways to hurt themselves no matter how careful you are. "Did you tell her that?" "Many times. She quit her job, stopped practicing, disappeared. I heard she'd been working as a waitress." Carmen looked at him. "Is that where you met her?" "Yes. She waited on me and my son. He has selective mutism, hasn't spoken in years. But Maya connected with him somehow. Got him to engage in ways no therapist ever could. She's been spending time with him, until last night when she got scared and pushed us away." "That sounds like Maya. She has this need to save everyone, fix everything. When she can't, she takes it as personal failure. How do I help her see that's not true?" "I don't know if you can," Carmen said honestly. "Guilt like that isn't rational. She has to choose to forgive herself." She stood, retrieved a photo album, flipped to a page. "This is Ethan's 6th birthday, 2 months before he died." The photo showed a laughing boy and beside him, also laughing, a younger, lighter Maya, free of the weight she carried now. "She was so good with him," Carmen said. "Made him feel safe. He loved her and she loved him. What happened was a tragedy, but it doesn't erase the good she did. Give this to her. Tell her it's time to remember the child she helped, not just the one she lost. Tell her Ethan would want her to keep helping kids like him, like your son." Elias took the album carefully. "Thank you for talking to me." "Help her," Carmen said. "She deserves to be happy again." That evening, Elias found Theo drawing in the living room. The boy looked up, his face complicated, hope, maybe, or a question. "I'm working on it," Elias said quietly. Theo held up his drawing, a stick figure with long hair standing between 2 others, one tall, one small. Family. That night, exhausted and running on fumes, Elias drafted and deleted a dozen emails before finally, at 2 in the morning, writing something simple. "Maya, I'm not going to chase you or pressure you, but I need you to know 3 things. First, Theo spoke last night. 1 word, your name or close to it. Second, I drove out to see Carmen Ruiz today. She doesn't blame you. She never did. She wanted me to give you something. Third, I'm in love with you. Not because you helped my son, though I'm grateful for that, but because you're kind and thoughtful and brave even when you don't feel brave. Because you see people other people miss. I understand if you can't be with me. But please don't disappear without knowing how much you matter, to Theo and to me." Elias. His phone buzzed at 6 in the morning. "What did Carmen give you?" No acknowledgement of anything else he'd written, but she'd responded. "A photo album from when she worked with Ethan. She thought you should have it. 3 dots, appearing and disappearing. Finally, can you bring it to Willow Bluff Park? Our usual spot. 10 a.m. Maya was already on the bench when he arrived, looking like she hadn't slept either. "Hi. Hi." He held out the album. "Carmen wanted you to have this." She took it carefully, sat down, opened it slowly. He watched emotions flicker across her face too fast to name. She stopped at the birthday photo. He was so happy that day, she said quietly. We'd been working on emotional regulation. He just had his best week ever. I thought we'd turned a corner. You had, Elias said, sitting beside her carefully. Carmen told me all the progress he'd made. And then he died. All that progress gone in 5 minutes because I wasn't paying attention. You were doing your job. Another patient needed you. Ethan needed me more. She closed the album. That's what everyone said, the police, the hospital, Carmen. But they weren't there. They didn't hear him hit the ground. Carmen doesn't blame you. She told me herself. Maya stood abruptly, started walking the trail. Elias followed. They walked in silence before she spoke again. I got your email. I know. That's why I'm here. You said Theo spoke. He did after we got home. He was upset you weren't there and I told him you weren't coming back. He looked at me and said your name. Well, May. Close enough. Maya stopped walking. First word in 3 years. Because of me leaving? Because he wanted you back. Elias moved to stand in front of her. He drew a picture this morning, the 3 of us together. That's what he wants. You, me, him. A family. Tears slid down her face. I can't be what you need. Why not? Because I'm broken. Because every time I close my eyes, I see Ethan falling. What if that happens to Theo? What if I get distracted, miss something? Then we deal with it together, Elias said. I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to be present, to stop running from something good just because you're scared it might go bad. You don't understand. I do actually. I'm scared every single day. Scared Theo will never talk, never connect. Scared my love isn't enough to break through whatever wall he's built. But being scared doesn't mean I stop trying. That's different. He's your son. You don't have a choice. And I don't have a choice about loving you either, Elias said. It just happened. Somewhere between teaching Theo to skip stones and watching you handle his meltdown at the gala, I fell in love with you. That's terrifying. But walking away because I'm scared, that's not protecting myself. That's just guaranteeing I end up alone. Maya was crying harder now. What if I try and fail? What if someone gets hurt? What if you try and succeed? What if you're exactly what we need? I'm so tired, she whispered. Tired of carrying this guilt. Tired of pushing people away. But I don't know how to stop. You start by forgiving yourself. You start by accepting that Ethan's death was a tragedy, not a failure. You start by letting yourself care about Theo without waiting for disaster. She looked at him, the war behind her eyes visible, fear and hope, grief and love tangled together. What if I'm not enough? What if you are? They stood there while joggers passed and the world continued around them. Finally, Maya took a shaky breath. I want to try. I'm terrified, but I want to try. Relief flooded through him. Yeah. She laughed, watery and uncertain. I must be insane. We both are. He pulled her close, and this time she let herself be held. They drove back to the house together, Maya insisting on following in her own car, needing to know she could leave if it became overwhelming. Theo ran to her the moment they walked in, throwing himself against her legs. Hey, she said, crouching. I'm sorry I left. That was scary, wasn't it? Theo nodded, clinging to her. I'm back now if you still want me around. Theo pulled back to look at her face, then opened his mouth. Stay. One word. Clear. Maya burst into tears, pulling him close. Okay. I'll stay. The following months brought slow, uneven progress. Maya moved in gradually, a toothbrush here, a sweater there, nothing official, nothing discussed, just natural as breathing. Theo's language expanded unevenly. Some days he chattered constantly, other days he retreated into humming. Maya said that was normal. He's figuring out how to use his voice again, she explained one evening. That takes time. Eleanor met Maya properly 3 weeks after the disastrous benefit, at a lunch Elias had been dreading. So you're the waitress, Eleanor said without pleasantries. Former waitress, Maya corrected gently. I gave notice last week. I'm going back to school, refresher courses. I've been out of the field too long. Eleanor's eyebrows rose. You're a psychologist? I took a break after a patient died. I'm ready to start again. The bluntness seemed to catch Eleanor off guard. She'd expected defensiveness, and instead got a plain fact stated without shame. Something in her demeanor shifted from judgment toward curiosity. By the weekend, Eleanor asked to take Theo to the aquarium. Maya came too. Watching Eleanor crouch beside her grandson, Listening to his observations about jellyfish, Elias felt something unclench that he hadn't realized he was still holding. "She's not what I expected," Eleanor told him afterward. "I thought you were making a mistake." "Is that a compliment?" "An observation." "You love her?" "Yes. And she makes Theo happy." "They make each other happy." Eleanor nodded slowly. "Then I suppose I should make an effort." Not much later, reality intruded. Carmen Ruiz's lawyer called Maya about a wrongful death suit against the hospital and social services agency. Maya named as a witness, not a defendant. The news sent her into a tailspin. She disappeared for 4 days, staying at her old apartment, texting brief reassurances but nothing more. Carmen herself eventually visited Maya directly, bringing documentation of safety violations, explaining that the systems had failed Ethan, not Maya. Maya called Elias afterward, crying so hard she could barely speak. "She doesn't blame me. She never did." She testified twice over the following months, explaining gaps in protocol that had left Ethan vulnerable. Carmen won her case. The hospital settled and implemented new safety measures. It wouldn't bring Ethan back, but it might protect the next child. Maya returned to practice, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence, taking on a handful of clients with selective mutism and trauma histories. "I forgot how good I was at this," she told Elias one evening, wonder in her voice. On a Saturday morning in early summer, almost exactly 6 months after that first dinner, Elias asked Maya to walk with him to their spot at Willow Bluff Park. Mrs. Alvarez had taken Theo to the Science Museum. At the shore he took her hands. "A year ago I thought my life was over in any way that mattered. Then you walked into a restaurant and everything changed." He knelt, opened a small box. "Maya Whitfield, will you marry me? Will you be Theo's mother and my wife, and the person I wake up beside for the rest of my life?" "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at once. "Yes, of course, yes." They married in October at Willow Bluff Park, the same shoreline where everything had started, followed by a small reception nearby, not at Lucerna, which Maya vetoed firmly. "It's weird, like having your wedding at your old office." Theo walked Maya down the aisle, holding her hand with the gravity of someone entrusted with a vital mission. Carmen Ruiz attended, which had made Maya cry when she saw the RSVP. In her vows, Maya said, "A year ago I thought my life was over. I'd failed someone I loved and decided the safest thing was to stop loving altogether. Then you and Theo walked into a restaurant and everything changed. You saw me when I was trying to be invisible. Thank you for not giving up on me." Elias answered, "You gave my son back his voice and you gave me back my hope. I know we'll mess this up sometimes. But I'd rather mess it up with you than succeed with anyone else." Months later, the adoption was finalized on an unremarkable Tuesday, just a judge's signature, and suddenly Maya was legally Theo's mother. They celebrated with ice cream and a movie neither of them watched, Theo sandwiched between them on the couch. "Does this mean you have to love me now?" Theo asked. "Because it's the law?" "I already loved you before it was the law," Maya said. "This just makes it official." 2 years after that first snowy dinner at Lucerna, on a bright Saturday in July, they returned to Willow Bluff Park. Theo ran ahead, taller now, gangly, shouting about something he'd found among the rocks. Maya and Elias followed, hands linked. "Do you ever think about that first night?" Maya asked. "What would have happened if I'd just taken your order and walked away?" "All the time," Elias admitted. "I think about how close I came to missing this. Missing you. We almost didn't happen. But we did." At the shore, Theo was building an elaborate structure from driftwood and stone, narrating the whole process to no one in particular. They sat and watched this child who'd been silent for so long and now couldn't stop talking. "I got a call yesterday," Maya said. "From the Children's Hospital. They want me to direct a new program for kids with selective mutism." "That's huge. What did you say?" "I said I'd think about it. It would mean restructuring the practice, a lot of changes. But it would mean helping more kids like Theo. You'd be amazing at it." "You think?" "I know." He pulled her close. "Whatever you decide, we'll make it work." "We," she repeated. "I like that. That it's always we now." Theo ran over, dragging a piece of driftwood twice his size. "Help me. It's too heavy." They both stood to help, the three of them working together until the structure resembled, more or less, a small lopsided fort. "Perfect," Theo declared. "Our house at the beach." "Our house," Maya agreed, ruffling his hair. Later, walking back to the car, Theo between them holding both their hands, Elias felt something he'd been chasing for years without knowing its name. Not happiness exactly, that word felt too simple for something this hard-won, but contentment. The sense that despite everything that had gone wrong, they had built something worth protecting. "Dad," Theo said, looking up. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, but more than okay. You look sad." "Not sad. Grateful, I think. For this. For you and Maya. For all of it." Theo considered this with his usual seriousness. "Me too," he said finally. "I'm grateful too." That night, after Theo was asleep, Elias found Maya reviewing case notes in what had become her office. "Come to bed," he said. "In a minute, I want to finish these." "Maya." She looked up, saw something in his face. "I just wanted to say thank you. For taking a chance on us. I know it wasn't easy." "Best decision I ever made," she said. "Even with all the fear and the panic in parking lots. Especially with all that," she added, "because it means I chose this knowing exactly how scary it was." He pulled her up from the desk, held her close. "I love you. I love you too. Now can I finish these notes?" "No. Notes can wait." She smiled and let them wait. Money hadn't bought this. Status hadn't earned it. All of Elias's success, all his power, had meant nothing in the face of a 7-year-old's silence. What had changed everything was the willingness to be vulnerable, to ask for help, to see value in a quiet, guarded waitress the rest of the world had overlooked. This was the miracle his billions couldn't buy. A messy, imperfect, beautiful life with a woman who had learned to forgive herself, and a son who had found his voice.